excellent. Welcome, Brianna. Good to have you joining us from the World Kite Museum, which I'm learning more about recently. Yeah, so good to have you with us, Freya. Good to see you again. All right, let's see. We've got a couple more folks entering from the waiting room, but I think we're going to go ahead and get started while a few more people arrive. They'll probably arrive during some of our introductory time. And of course, this is being recorded. And so you should be able to receive that recording later and access it to review if you have any other questions. So this is the Diversity and Local History Grant application workshop. It's great to know that there's this interest in applying to our Diversity in Local History grant. I am Alethea Whitman. I manage the grant program. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out directly. I'll share my contact information. We also have a couple other team members joining us that I just want to acknowledge. And Dylan and Allison, do you want to just say hi and your names and who you are for those who don't know? I think most people know.
Morning, everybody. Allison here on the team with Alethea and Dylan in Heritage Outreach, and delighted to see you all this morning.
And Dylan, hi, with the Historical Society Heritage Outreach team. Allison and I sit right back to back, so if you see us playing a little bit of mute tag team, that's we're trying to cut back on feedback. But glad to be here and here to support the session today.
Great. Thanks, Dylan and Allison. And Dylan and Allison, they've got a lot of things going today, so maybe in and out depending, but we're really glad to have them here and their expertise. Make sure my slides are going. Okay. So we've done a little bit of introduction to our team. This is how you can contact us. You'll have access to the slides later. And so, this is where to find us. So the Diversity and Local History program, some of you are aware of this grant program. This QR code should take you to our website. This is on the screen is a little view that you'll find, so you know you've made it to the right place. On the website, you'll find our program guidelines, which we're going to talk about, a link to apply, to go be directed to our Heritage portal, which we'll also take a look at today. But this is a way to kind of get all of your DLH questions answered. In the meantime, you're always welcome to reach out to me as well. So a grant overview. This is the big picture for what the Diversity and Local History Grant is. So it is a program that awards small grants to heritage organizations to fund paid internships that support inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility initiatives. The proposals for these grants, they need to be about supporting the integration of IDEA principles into an organization's operations, or promoting a long-term focus on whole history practices. We say whole history practices sometimes. Some people say inclusive history practices. Really, it's about telling the whole story and being conscientious of voices and perspectives that have been traditionally left out of telling the whole story of our areas. So that's an ongoing job for museums, and sometimes we're able to take big leaps in that and small leaps in that, but all of that is kind of getting us towards this whole history and sharing that with our audiences. So these grants, they're open to all heritage organizations in Washington State, regardless of an existing track record of commitment to IDEA work. So what that means is that you might be just taking your first step, doing something that is explicitly about inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, And that's okay. We love to be a support for those projects. You don't have to have been doing this work for a long time in order to get funding. I see a question in the chat, which is about how do you define heritage organization? And we are going to talk about that next. So I'm really glad you asked that question. Quick review of the timeline and where we're at in the timeline of applications. So the grant opened February 19th. Here we are at the grant workshop on March 11th. 17th of April, the grant applications are due. Between the grant announcement and the grant application being due, we have a group of external panelists that come together to review applications using the guidance of our grant criteria. And so any project work and monitoring, that's really running from July of this year through June of next year. So that should actually say running through June of 2027. And projects need to be completed, final reports submitted by the 30th of June, 2027. So you would be able to find out by June if you were awarded a grant. Definitions. Okay, so right at the top, we have history organization. That's a word that comes up a lot in our grant guidelines. So we define that as a group whose primary purpose is to collect, preserve, or interpret history and heritage. So that's where that heritage kind of like intersects with how we understand history organization. So sometimes we say heritage organization, sometimes we say history organization. We tend to use history organization more, but it really does include, for the most part, organizations that think about themselves as heritage organizations, you know, history museums, historical societies, that kind of thing. We also refer to the heritage sector. And so we talk about, when we talk about the heritage sector, what we mean is the broad base of organizations preserving and interpreting history for the public, including museums, historical societies, historic houses, tribal entities, local government entities, and unincorporated community groups. The other big term that comes up in this grant program is intern. And so what do we mean by intern? So here we're talking about an emerging professional seeking work-related learning and hands-on experience in the heritage sector. And feel free to keep asking questions in the chat if you're interested in following up on anything that I'm sharing. I'll try to keep checking the chat. So last grant cycle, we had a little bit of new things in the guidelines, and I'm just going to go over them again here because there's some bigger changes, and so I just want folks to be aware. So what we changed last year was that the maximum grant request for projects the cap was lifted to $25,000 for the full project proposal. But within that, intern hours are not to exceed 800 hours or $16,800 because those interns are paid at a $21 an hour rate. So the rest of that grant could be used for staffing, consultant support for the intern, but it's not to exceed 35% of the overall grant request. So there's a certain percent, you would be able to request for that staffing or consultant support. And then we were just talking about our definition of an intern. There's no degree attainment specifically associated with intern definition or eligibility, but you will want to look at the intern eligibility requirements in our guidelines to understand, what might make somebody ineligible to be considered an intern. So good to check out all the things that we say in the guidelines. Okay, I'm just gonna check the chat, make sure I'm catching everything. Adam had a question. Should interns be people who are seeking a career in the heritage field specifically? We do talk about emerging professionals. And so, that does, I think, speak to the idea that, we're hoping that in this grant program, people are getting opportunities to build their career in the heritage field. Um, we can take a look at the exact language we have in the guidelines, but we say that they could be, coming from different related areas of development in their career. They might, for example, have, a history degree. And maybe they kind of go the academic historian route after this, but building their career in a heritage organization really makes sense as a part of their path. But it could also be maybe they come from like sociology or anthropology or administration or, kind of more communications, like all of those backgrounds that kind of brought someone to the heritage sector to try to build their career are great entry points to us. So there's not limitations in that respect. But if they're seeking a job in a heritage field specifically, they are, their career is kind of beginning in the heritage sector. So we do want to encourage that. And the idea is that paid internships give people more opportunities and choice to stick around if they like it.
Alethea,
Yeah.
I'm also just to mention in terms of the process and the application that the intern selection process doesn't happen until after the project has been selected and awarded. And so just kind of thinking about that intern selection and where it happens in the process. Anyway, I just want to point that out.
Thank you, Dylan. Yeah. And the part that you would need to speak to in your application, that's really kind of higher level. We're asking about, how would you support the intern? And, what are your recruiting plans at the very beginning, knowing that you're at the very beginning of kind of thinking about how you would bring an intern on. So we're kind of interested in getting ideas about, what your steps would be, but you wouldn't be recruiting, and it's actually important that you wouldn't be recruiting for the intern prior to, getting the grant. Yeah. Let's see. And yes, question about will these slides be available after this session? Yes, they will. Thank you. All right. So things that are new this grant cycle that you'll see in the program guidelines. So this year, fiscally sponsored organizations are eligible to apply. This means that in the application, when you go into it, you will be able to check a box of yes, you are a fiscally sponsored organization, or no, you are not. And then there's different information that those fiscally sponsored organizations will need to fill out. This is to make sure that we are connected with your fiscal sponsor, who will need to be part of the contracting process with us, and also get that information about your fiscal sponsor and a little bit about you, kind of documents that show us sort of your status with the Washington Secretary of State's office. We want to understand that you're set up, in the system as a organization, even if you don't have 501c3 status yet. So we understand that that stage of an organization's formation is really important, and support at that stage is really important. And so we actually have heard a lot from fiscally sponsored organizations recently and work to make that part of the process. And we do have some new application evaluation criteria. And so we're going to go over both of those things, like what you can anticipate seeing in these new parts of the grant. So who is eligible? We were talking about fiscally sponsored organizations being eligible this year. So you can see that that's highlighted. That's the new part of the eligibility pool that you could be to and to apply for this grant. But it also includes nonprofits, so formalized 501c3s in the state of Washington, tribal organizations, local governmental entities in Washington state. That would include city governments. So city governments have been the recipient of this grant in the past. And the other eligibility factor is that organizations must have a mission to preserve and interpret history and heritage for the general public. So that is something to really think about as you consider your just like kind of the basics of whether or not you're eligible for this grant. And I think it can be helpful in determining if this grant is a right fit for you. So I'm curious, before we move on, just to prompt anyone who has maybe some questions specifically about eligibility before we move on. Feel free to add to the chat if you like, or come off mute. I'll just pause for a moment. Okay, great. Okay, I see there's a question in the chat that is about being a grant-funded project housed within a state university, UW. So what I'm wondering, Izzy, is your grant-funded project fiscally sponsored by the University of Washington? And what kind of project status does your project have, as whether it's a 501c3 or fiscally sponsored?
That's a great question. We're not a 501c3. We're part of the University of Washington. So I guess it would fall under fiscal. That's not what they call it, though. But I guess it would sort of fall under fiscal sponsorship. Like, we are literally part of the university technically,
Okay.
but we operate independently, and then we're funded through a grant from the Mellon Foundation.
Oh, interesting. Okay, well, I think a great next step for you is to follow up with the folks you work with, your administrators, maybe of these grant funds, or the main contact you have for fiscal support within the university, and just ask them if you would be considered a fiscally sponsored organization. And get a little bit of information, and you're welcome to send me an email directly. We can talk about the status and if that fits in the guidelines. But I will say that we cannot fund other state entities. So for example, like, we can't fund the Burke Museum. That's part of the University of Washington. So I want to say it might not work in this case, but I think it's good to ask. Yeah, I think it's good to ask the question. Good information to have anyway in the future, as you prefer, as you kind of peruse other grant opportunities, because sometimes similar things come up, at least when you're seeking funding from another state entity like us. Many people don't know, but we are a small agency of Washington state. So yeah, great question. This is exactly the point, and of having our workshop time together, so we can kind of get at some of these good questions. Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Alethea?
Yeah.
I don't know if this would be applicable to Izzy's project, but if an organization that's housed at a state entity has a nonprofit partner on that project that they kind of collaborate, that group could be the applicant, essentially.
Yeah. Yes, if there was another sort of like project-based partner that you were working with, Izzy, they might be able to be the applicant if they have 501c3 status or they're a fiscally sponsored organization. and you could be, a collaborating partner. And just like the funds would need to be going to the 501c3 or the fiscally sponsored org. Yeah, that's a great point, Allison. That might be another good way to go about it. And we love partner projects. So, it just strengthens a grant to see that you have a really strong, community relationship that might be part of the project. So could work well. Great. Feel free to jump in if there's other questions about eligibility. So just to say a little bit more about this new information to the grant this year about if you are a fiscally sponsored organization, all of this is in the program guidelines. So don't worry, you don't have to remember this. It will be on slides we send out, but just to give you a little preview and a little taste, the fiscal sponsors representatives are required to provide some information before the applicant can submit. So this is the list of not unusual things to a fiscal sponsor that they might provide for those organizations that are looking to apply to grants. So just always good to make your fiscal sponsor aware as early as possible of your interest and like what is going to be required that they fill out in the application form. And so it's not a ton of information, but I know just kind of delivering that information early can be very helpful for them. And then for the applicant organization who is being fiscally sponsored, they need to fill out a couple things, just documentation, as I said, that you're registered as a charitable nonprofit corporation with the Washington Secretary of State's office. This was kind of like the basic boilerplate documentation that our partners at ArtsWA ask for when they receive applications from fiscally sponsored organizations. So we're following suit. And then there's an attestation that the grant guidelines have been given to and discussed with your fiscal sponsor. So again, that's why it's good to get that information over to your fiscal sponsor as early as possible, because then you can click that, hey, I told my fiscal sponsor we're applying for this grant box, just so that we know everyone's aware and we're not in the middle, and you all are proceeding together as the grant gets submitted. Okay. So I also talked about some new criteria that are in the guidelines this year. So the existing criteria were 1 through 4 on this slide here. There's a project plan criteria, a project impact criteria, an audience engagement criteria, and an organizational sustainability criteria. Those have existed before, and we have questions in the application that help you demonstrate basically that you have all of these things. And the new one this year is that we have a criteria that's focused on the diversity and local history grants program priorities. So that's us trying to be transparent about what this grant is trying to accomplish, and giving you the opportunity to demonstrate how you are a really good candidate for us to fund to help live out some of those program priorities. So I'll say a little bit more. So that new program priority criteria is about the degree to which the proposal, your grant proposal, supports overall alignment with our program priorities. And our program priority statement, which you can find in our guidelines, is that we are trying to improve inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility efforts in heritage organizations statewide. That's the intent, founding intent of this grant program, in addition to supporting emerging professionals with paid internships through these projects. So here I have a few different ways that we talk about in the guidelines that we believe that we can be living out these priorities. So what are we looking for in terms of the pool of grantees so that we know we're doing what we're intended to do. So that's everything from that the reach of the grant funds, they should be going to organizations and audience that face added challenges in their work. So we have heard a lot from rural organizations, small, all volunteer and fiscally sponsored organizations, and organizations preserving the histories of underserved racial and ethnic communities encountering. We've heard from them that they encounter some of the most significant barriers. So we know that one of our measures should be, are our grant funds reaching organizations that identify this way? We also want grant funds to be supporting idea efforts at every stage of development. That's something we talked about before. So we don't want just big and established organizations to be getting this grant. We really want this to be able to be kickstarting grant money for organizations that haven't been doing this work for very long. We also want to fund proposals where plain language is used and reinforce that we're not interested in only funding organizations that have some kind of idea related terms that they're very fluent in and can talk this kind of complicated talk about their projects. Plain language is all that's required, and the most important thing is that you have a compelling project. And we also have been conscientious that even though we do not limit the number of times an organization can apply to the grant, or we don't have any limits on how many times you can get the grant award, and some organizations have gotten it in multiple years, we do want to be conscientious of distributing funds statewide to as many different organizations as possible. So this is our way of saying, like, you're not ineligible, but in the big scheme and the big picture, this is just something we're thinking about as we read your applications. And we want to make sure that in the big scheme of things, there's a way to honor that so that our funds can reach as far as possible. Okay, I'm going to check the chat and see if I've got any more questions. Okay, and thanks for adding to the chat, Izzy, a partner org. I'd love to look into that and get back to you after I've done that. That sounds like an amazing organization. Okay, let me just check my time. How are we doing? All right, keep moving. Okay, so grantee responsibilities. Organizations must provide a project manager for interns who can guide the work of an intern and support their professional development. Remember, now a percentage of the grant award can be used to support that project staff, or even an external consultant who's really providing that intern supervision. And that person, we're looking for that person to have professional training. Like, why are they able to be the person who can support the intern in this project? So, it could be that professional training, but it could also be just kind of that direct experience in museums, public history, other related fields. However, it's not a requirement. We're just looking to see that this person who's there to support the intern could realistically support them well. And we're just looking for, grantees to be able to check in with their intern regularly, and someone who's there at the organization who can help make decisions about the project, because interns are usually not able to or endowed with the power to make bigger decisions. And of course, we want them to be supported. And of course, this is an educational experience. We understand that makes internship projects more complex because they're helping with work that you want to do, but it's also important that they have an educational experience. And that's, part of the reciprocal nature of setting up an internship program. And it does require labor and communication. So I mentioned this before, organizations must have funds to pay interns $21 an hour, at least twice monthly. $21 an hour is the set rate for interns to be paid through this grant program. And it is a reimbursement-based program. So you're submitting your requests for reimbursement to us based on a report of hours and that you've paid the intern. So you're sharing your pay stubs or your financial reports with us so that we know that they have the money and we can pay you back. So you don't need to have the full grant amount available. Sometimes that's quite a big sum, but you should be able to have about 1 month's payments for interns on hand throughout the project. And then projects should have defined goals and clear deliverables. We'll take a look at the application software view so you can kind of see, what that looks like on the application itself. But we're really looking for, and the panel who reviews the grants are really looking for clarity, realistic parameters around the project, and also that there's these proposals would meaningfully contribute to developing those whole history practices and a meaningful experience for the intern that you've hired. So, what kinds of projects? If you're still brewing ideas about what kind of projects you'd like to propose or what would be good projects to propose to DLH, here are some ideas. So things that have been funded, there's been a lot in the category of collections work. Great place to connect an intern with. And often there are hours and hours of work that needs to be done in our history and heritage collections to digitize or work on, in the collections database or, do some kind of data management. There's all sorts of skills related to collections that it's great to introduce emerging professionals to. And we've had organizations funded in Edmonds, Tacoma, City of Lacey, Bainbridge Island Historical Society, Jefferson County Historical Society, Wenatchee Valley Museum. So this has been a really popular area for proposing an internship project. And often it's very clear-cut kinds of duties and learning experiences, which work really well for intern programs. So, consider that. But there's many more areas where interns can make a big contribution. Education, outreach, strategy, and research. Research in particular, along with collections, that just seems to be a lot of the everyday work of a lot of our heritage organizations. So things that, you would love to make some progress on, or maybe work towards a goal related to, making sure your collections are representative of the communities you serve, maybe making sure that you're engaging communities, and, thinking about, what more could your collections represent? And education, often there's online resource development, designing educational materials. That's also a great project that we've seen funded. Exhibits, of course, that's probably one of the other most common, along with programming, to see proposals for. And, these have happened in Kent, Highland Museum, Neely Mansion, Nikai Heritage Association of Washington, Washington State Jewish Historical Society, and interpretive signage. There's been some very, very cool interpretive signage that's been created with the support of interns. And it's a really nice, final product to have worked on, with an intern, and a great thing to, have a clear public benefit. We're always looking for that connection to audiences and how the work of the intern is going to have an impact. So those are things to keep in mind too. We don't see as many of these proposals, but that doesn't mean that there's not great project ideas that we'd love to see proposed. Things related to accessibility of your organization, of your space. So are you doing evaluation? Are you doing surveys? Maybe material translation? Are you interested in knowing more about how to do good website upgrades that would support users who have different types of accommodation needs when they encounter your digital presence? And then we also love to see, are you researching and identifying new audiences and thinking about ways to connect and build relationships? Create a style guide that's for publications, mailings, catalog entries that helps you know that you are connecting in an informed way to communities, in an inclusive way with communities. Those are all fundable activities. This slide, I did not take this off, but last year, we wanted to encourage organizations to propose 250, our centennial anniversary that we're celebrating and commemorating here in Washington State. And so this is still on there from last year, but it's probably a little too late to propose 250 projects. And there's many more, hopefully this gives you some good ideas. You can take a look at these slides later and, go through in detail if there's something that catches your eye. But before I move on, is there any questions about what projects could be good ideas to propose? Okay, great. So with that, I am going to stop sharing this screen and I am going to share our application portal with you, just to give you a little preview of what that looks like. Okay. Okay. Please let me know if there's any issues you have with seeing screen share. So this is what our Heritage portal looks like if you log on as a Heritage organization. This is a grant application that is, in draft form at this stage. There's no information filled in. As I scroll down, I'm just going to show you that there's kind of the boilerplate organizational profile information that we're going to ask you about: mission, vision, values, contacts, project manager. We want to get to know your organization, so there's some simple questions about who you are and who staffs and operates your organization. We have a little bit of a section here that's asking to tell us a little bit more about what inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility means to your organization. If you have any statements, why it's important. And we're interested in how you might connect with our program priorities. And there's a little link here so you can kind of be reminded of some of those program priorities. This is your request summary. So this is the headlines, a little bit about the intern costs that you've estimated. And of course, if you would like to request staff or consultant support. There's going to be some automatic totaling that happens in our system. And so as you go, you'll see some of these numbers update as you save please remember to save your application. So this is really important. Remember, we were talking about having a really clear and well-defined project. This project description field is going to ask you about the project outcomes. And so, you know, even if you have kind of like the big project idea, we want to see you kind of break it down into smaller outcomes. Give us an estimated start and end date of these different stages where, you know, you'd have different outcomes as you go. And then really describe what is the intern doing and how will you be supporting them, and then any products you'll have completed in this stage of your project. So these don't need to be long at all. We love short descriptions, not a ding at all if you are expressing yourself in a short, concise way. But we do want to just really understand all the parts that will go into your overall project, and that clarity of, you know, how you're breaking down and understanding the project ahead will be really critical in our panel's discussion of your application. They want to see focus. You know, they want to see that you have a sense of, you know, each step of the way, maybe the labor and time and intern support needed. So please keep in mind all those things. For project logistics, that's the next field. We're asking you, you know, are you ready to begin? What else might need to happen? A little bit about intern recruitment. Of course, we know that that's going to happen later on, but, you know, we'd like to get a sense of, are there existing pools or networks that you know you would go to find the right intern? And then a little bit about the nature of the program, very short estimates here that we'd like to see about the logistical parts. And then the project impacts is the final content section. So we want to know, how is this work going to broaden your audience, contribute to audience diversity, or strengthen community engagement? We would like to, you know how it will support long-term sustainability of the organization, or maybe the future projects you have ahead of you, things that you'd like to achieve with your idea work. So how does this fit in the big picture, this project? And then any skill building and growth you anticipate offering through this project for an intern. We just, you know, love to see what the emerging professional might be getting out of their engagement with you through this project. And the final section is documents. And so we're going to be looking for your IRS determination letter, your roster of governing authority members. So that might be, you know, your board of trustees, your tribal council, and a little bit of information about who those people are. We'd like a current financial statement, and then please take the opportunity to share other supporting documents. Maybe you're working with a partner letter that's kind of describing how excited they are about the project and what they're going to do to support you if you get the grant, and any other you know, information or maybe background. And I know that the panelists read that, so I really encourage you to take advantage of that if you you know, have anything else to share that just gives people a bit of a better understanding about who you are and impact of the work that you would like to do through the grant program. And so again, I'll say, you know, save as you go. We always don't want you to lose any work in this this application process, and also reach out to me. Once you start an application, if you get confused or you have a question, you're not on your own. I'm happy to help you out any way I can. So please feel free to reach out if you need anything along the way. I see a question from Adam in the chat. So Adam's asking, are you looking to fund organizations that are culturally specific, accessible, and already represent who they serve, and therefore are not necessarily engaging in idea work? Okay, let me think about this. Adam, do you mind saying a little bit more about your question? Are you asking about, do you already have to have some demonstrated success doing what you want to do before you get funding to do it? Can you help me with some clarification?
I'm happy to explain this. Does this work coming
Thank
up?
you.
Okay, great. Yeah. Okay, so what I'm kind of talking about is that what I'm seeing in a lot of the guidelines is kind of talking about organizations that could be anywhere on kind of an idea journey.
Yeah.
But the organization that I'm talking about is a specifically Black history focused organization. All the leadership is part of that community. Most of the contributors are, and they would be looking to kind of produce more Washington related Black history content, deepening what they have already, etc. So would that be something that you're interested in funding? Because I guess that's not what I think of as being something that's engaging in idea work. Is something that kind of, I think, advances the concept, right? By the fact that it is a culture specific organization, but they're not needing to if they're not needing to, I guess, consciously think about it as much because they're within the community. They're already serving the community. So that's kind of my question.
Yeah, got it.
If that makes sense.
It does. It does. Thank you for clarifying. So, I would say that context matters for, the things that we do in each organization that, gets considered inclusion, diversity, equity, accessibility work. And for community-based organizations that are focused on, interpreting local history, but like with a very specific goal to be amplifying, in this case, like Black histories, that is how that work looks in that organization. And of course, there's other things that organization might be interested in doing, related to accessibility or diversity and representing stories in other dimensions, right? That they are very focused in this organization you're describing on kind of like resourcing that work, and that work exists because of the need for equity, right? And inclusion in the histories we tell. So, I think that just demonstrating like the impact of having platforms to share those stories, and the maybe irreplaceable service that organization provides, the broader heritage sector, when those stories don't have maybe a platform or many platforms, that this is where these stories are being told, really kind of puts in perspective like why we really need that work to happen at organizations like the one you're describing. So, and to the point of kind of the language we use to talk about that, I think that, like I said, you don't have to use all the buzzwords. It's really just giving the panel who's looking at the information a really clear understanding of the impact and like how you're connecting to, idea work as we talk about it, whichever way that will be. So does that help?
Yeah, it does. I do kind of have I guess, a bit of a follow-up question slash thought. I do see that, for example, last year you funded the Suquamish Tribal Museum.
Yeah.
And that they are, just looking at how the project is described, it looks like it's something that is really like, it's advancing something that's unique, right, to this, to like the particular indigenous community, to the Suquamish people, particularly, right? It's not necessarily, I don't see it as like advancing, at least from what I'm looking at, that doesn't look like it's opening up anything new, but it's kind of like for a new audience or new accessibility or anything like that, but it's advancing what they are already doing, which is the primary platform for telling the stories of the Squamish history. Is that correct? You say that?
Yeah, I would, and the funding for that project was a new temporary exhibit, interns supporting a new temporary exhibit at Suquamish. So, I think that in their proposal, there was a real clarity of like the kind of the singular nature of the platform that they're offering, the impact there, and that kind of to the same example that you're describing in the organization you're describing, that that with the organization, it's providing a platform for histories that are otherwise not told at all in the broader heritage sector, and that it's best when communities tell their own stories from their perspectives and are making decisions about how how those stories are told. So I think that the comparison you're making maybe there makes sense to me, and I think that one project doesn't have to address all aspects that exist in doing, inclusion, diversity, equity work. There's just so much to do. And so our grant award wants to honor those steps, like, just to resource those steps. And sometimes it looks like resourcing the everyday work that's like inherently connected to inclusion. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess if you don't mind, just one more question. I really, really appreciate your time and
No,
letting me
you're
for
good.
so long.
You're good. Yeah.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. I guess I'm just not seeing this necessarily reflected in the guidelines. So one thing is that would you venture that would it be, do you think for this kind of organization we're talking about, would it be stronger to kind of be just talking about advancing their everyday work that inherently connects to these idea principles that we're talking about? Or would you say they would be stronger if they were doing something that was advancing accessibility for, say, another, expanding like, from the differently abled accessibility or something like that, or, connecting with another community, kind of some intersectional, some intersectional subjects. Do you think that would be stronger, or do you think it kind of just depends on the organization and the work?
I mean, I think if there's like a case that the next step or the next right work is that like intersectional work, that's contributing to the long-term sustainability or the audience, or like I could understand that, but I wouldn't maybe I think if that's not the right next step, and the right next step for the idea work is something different, I wouldn't want people to kind of think that has to be it, right? That just to get the grant, for example. So if that's the right thing, and that's what people are talking about, and that's you're kind of ready to do that, you maybe have a partner. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. But I would say that for or sometimes to give you another example, like sometimes organizations will propose a project like with their collections, for example, and they'll be like, we're just doing a survey of our collection, the stories and that are currently documented through our collection, the communities that are currently represented in our collection. We're just gathering information about communities that don't seem well represented, that we feel we should be representing given our our mission and our charge, our responsibilities to our communities. So they're doing an inventory just to kind of understand the gaps that really matter to them, that they feel should direct their next steps. So I think that's another way to approach it if that is something that's being talked about in the organization, like that in itself, that research and that looking at what you're already doing to understand those opportunities for the future, that's something that's been funded in the past. But I would say too, like there's sometimes just more processing collections that just need labor and time, that bringing emphasis and focus to even the stories of a few individuals who are very important, and their perspectives are under recognized, right? And those stories aren't going to be documented anywhere else. I think there's also a case on that scale to propose a really compelling project, because if you're able to talk about the important role of a few individuals and that you could share their stories with a broader audience, then that would be also very impactful. But I do think that we are looking for that audience impact. So whatever's happening, are you thinking about ways for the impact of your work to reach new audiences? And so however you kind of have audience development goals, or maybe if it's not something you're already doing, like some new platforms you might be able to get the word out about these kinds of narratives that need a platform, I think that would be good to consider too.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Yeah, and appreciate the feedback about maybe speaking to some of those things in the guidelines more. I totally think we could do that, and maybe address some of these questions more. Thank you. Okay, we've got a couple more minutes, and I see that Freya has a question about how much money will WSHS be distributing this round. So each round we have 75,000 to distribute through these awards. And so, that's the money we know that we have to grant out. So that's what we can anticipate for this year, Freya. And this can be, it kind of depends on like the requests that come in and the merit of those requests, right? That how many organizations are going to get a grant, but it's been from, 11 to 8. I think there were a few less last year because the cap was higher. But honestly, a lot of the grants that we saw, the proposals were, lower amounts. It was just like people picked the right request for the scale of the project. And sometimes, an intern oriented project is just going to be less hours, less money. And so a lot of organizations are working at that scale. So when those, we see a lot of smaller requests, and those are the proposals that the panelists like then there'd be more. So it kind of will depend on who applies this year. And really it boils down to like the merit that the panel sees in the proposals. Yeah. Well, we have reached our time. And I just want to say thank you so much to everyone who was able to join us today. And thank you for your really great questions. We love hearing from applicants because it gets us thinking and gives us some feedback about how we can support you all better. Please reach out. Don't be a stranger. I'm here if you have questions. And it's always a great time at this time to reach out to me if you are going to submit an application. If you want a little chance to chat or something, I'm here for that. So thank you so much, everybody. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. We'll send some follow-up materials soon, so you have slides and you have the recording. Thanks so much. Bye. Have a good day.